The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. So, what has been underreported in the mainstream media is going to be reported here today. The Zizian transgender cult. Also, Fort Knox is going to be audited. Is there any gold left in there? Some people think not. And Doge getting access to the IRS. These stories and more are coming up today's podcast. Let's get into the headlines. All right, we're going to start off with the AP. That is the Associated Press. Police arrest apparent leader of cult-like Zizian group linked to multiple killings in the U.S. So here's the deal. If you didn't know anything about this, this is a rationalist cult that is against the rationalist establishment. So the Associated Press starts out saying how a group of young, highly intelligent computer scientists, most of them in their 20s and 30s, met online, shared anarchist beliefs, and became increasingly violent. Their goals aren't clear, but online writings span topics from radical veganism and gender identity to artificial intelligence. The original Associated Press article that I read over the weekend was scrapped. Wasn't able to find it, where it delved into the background of the cult. So I don't have a lot of it here. I had saved the article, but when I went back to the Associated Press article, it was gone. It was redone with this shorter article. It was written over. And it went in depth about the killings involved in several different states performed by members of this cult. So before I get into the couple other articles regarding this, most people know that the tip of the iceberg came when a Border Patrol officer pulled over this vehicle in Vermont and then was summarily shot and killed by the occupants of that vehicle. The officer returned fire, killing one of the occupants, and the other occupant is now in custody for murder. But there's more to the story. The reality of what this is, and extremely violent, is obviously people with gender dysphoria and other issues. So if you didn't know what rationalism is it's really the opposite of, well, I'm not going to digress too much into rationalism, but it's against the writings and philosophy of John Locke, who was one of the founding philosophers of modern liberalism or libertarianism, what this country was founded on. So I'm not going to get into that here, but they didn't even agree with the rationalist community, the rationalist establishment. And rationalism just basically means anything that is can be understood through deduction and the mind, and you don't have to experience it, which is the opposite of what most people know. And you would never understand life by being in a bubble and just deducing it on your own. Like, you would understand what being outside is without ever going outside. And I didn't want to digress too much into that. But the leader of this cult, Lasota, who used she, her pronouns and in her writings, so the Associated Press is going to go ahead with this person's delusion, and even though it's a cult leader that is involved in murder, is still going to oblige by what this person wants by referring to them as a female, because we don't want to insult them, certainly. So in her writings, she says she is a transgender woman, railed against perceived enemies, including so-called rationalist groups, even though that they consider themselves rationalist. And that's where the discrepancy in some of the AP reporting happens, which operate mostly online and seek to understand human cognition through reason and knowledge. Some are concerned with the potential dangers of artificial intelligence. Well, as I went into the rationalists and what they believe, what we need to understand about this group specifically is, even as being rationalists, they raged against perceived enemies, including rationalists. So their whole idea basically is that, and with the rationalist, and this is fringe rationalists believe that you can express gender without any regard to your sex assigned at birth. All right, let's get into the post-millennial article written by Andy No. Andy No reports fugitive trans terror leader and 2 members of the Ziz group arrested in Maryland. They were found in a forested area in Frostburg, Maryland, a rural Appalachian region in the westernmost part of the state. The article goes on to say 3 known members of the transgender leftist extremist cult linked to 6 violent deaths across the U.S., as well as a history of escapes, were arrested in rural western Maryland on Friday the 16th after evading law enforcement and officials for years. Nobody knew about this group until a couple months ago, month and a half ago. Group leader Jack Amadeus Lasota, 34, known by the alias Ziz, was taken into custody by Maryland State Police, as was Michelle Jacqueline Jamo Zachko, also transgender, and Daniel Arthur Hastur Blank, 26. They were found in a forested area in Frostburg, Maryland, a rural Appalachian region in the westernmost part of the state. Lasota and Jacko were armed, as all these people were, and that's how they got found out. Most of the time, people saw people with weapons, and although that shouldn't raise alarm, if you're a transgender person wearing all black with weapons and acting peculiar, people did call the police. They face charges of trespassing on private property, firearms offenses, and obstruction of hindering. Zajko is charged with resisting or interfering with arrest, but none of them are accused of using their guns or assaulting state troopers. Well, was it in California? In one of the places they were living, apparently they were living in a couple box trucks on private property and were paying rent. And when they stopped paying rent, the landlord addressed them and said you need to pay rent, and the landlord was summarily stabbed with a sword and then blinded in one eye. Purportedly, the members, uh, uh, the landlord used a gun to shoot and kill one of the members of the Zizian cult. And then the Zizian cult later returned, purportedly, to gun down this landlord. So this is one of the murders involved here in this case. The Telegraph is reporting transgender vegan cult leader arrested in U.S. over 6 deaths. Of course, this is the Telegraph, and it's a vegan cult leader. Jack Lasota is allegedly the head of the Zizians, whose members are alleged to have worked for NASA and Google. This is where it gets interesting. The members, mostly in their 20s and 30s, are said to have met online and reportedly developed radical views on topics such as veganism, gender identity, and artificial intelligence. The key to this is their rationalist belief, and I may go into it later or probably tomorrow to give a comparison between rationalism and its logical opposite. So they are highly intelligent, working for NASA and Google, and that seems to be some sort of theme. It seems to be over intellectualizing seems to be a common thread in this cult and in transgender violence, which there is. Now there seems to be more transgender violence than violence against transgenders. The Federalist reports in this article by Nathaniel Blake, transgender ideology is in retreat, but we must fight it until it is destroyed. Those who have staked their livelihoods and reputations on transgender ideology are not going to give up quietly or go away, says Nathaniel Blake. The reality with this is not necessarily the gender confused people themselves as much as it is the allies or the support group of people who are transgender that are of right mind but are supporting and buttressing the ideology of these folks. Is there a logical end? Yeah, I don't know. Related story here from Fox News. Drag show at Dallas church features drag pastor who said, "I will kill Trump supporters." The drag performer made jokes about fighting Republicans and sacrificing Trump supporters. So do you see a thread here? Now, this person, this pastor at this Dallas church, apparently didn't have anything to do with the Zizians, but there seems to be a thread here. Also, the Nashville shooting at the white Christian school also is part of this longer thread that is starting to be pulled on, and it's unwinding that after all the support of transgender or gender dysphoric individuals, the support for them, now they have become emboldened and are buying into the propaganda that they're somehow under attack or under threat, and so are lashing out as a persecuted minority, supposed persecuted minority. More news from the Associated Press. Stay with me now. Top Russian and U.S. officials discuss improving ties and ending Ukraine war. And they say, the Associated Press says, without Kiev. Now, I've railed a long time against the Ukrainian war. People accuse me of taking sides with the Russians. That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just putting everything into context. And people that are afraid to put information or debate or discussion in context are not only wrong, but are part of the propaganda narrative and really cultural Marxism, where you have folks that are willing to try to publicly shame you into agreeing with something that you don't want to agree with, whatever your POV is or your belief system is or what have you, won't allow you. And for me, the Ukrainian war is one of them. So America is just talking with Russians right now. And since we understand that it's NATO against Russia, not Ukraine against Russia, we also understand that the most powerful member of NATO is the United States, hence the leader of NATO, hence the one that should be discussing the war between NATO, whether it's a proxy or not, whatever you want to call it, the war between Russia and NATO, which is what this is. More disturbing news. The Prime Minister ready. The UK Prime Minister is ready to put troops on the ground in Ukraine to protect peace. So let me just flesh this out for you. Speaking of context. So America, the United States, Donald Trump, is trying to get a ceasefire and a peace accord in place in Ukraine to build a lasting peace there. Putting it into the context of reality, not the propaganda. So what Starmer is proposing is to instigate further warfare by putting a catalyst for a false flag into Ukraine. So you put NATO troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers, and then they get killed by Russians, and we're off to the races. Then we have an actual war between the United States and Russia, which we don't want to be in a war with the United States and Russia, but NATO members have dragged us in. So, that being said, let's move on to some silliness. One America News is reporting Kamala Harris was mocked for word salad speech at Broadway's Louis Armstrong musical. And I'll just read what she said here. In times when we're dealing with so much in the world, we have to find those moments that are about joy and shining, you know, as we say, shining a light in moments of darkness. Harris goes on to say, when we think about these moments, where we see things that are being taken, but also let's see, you know, nature abhors a vacuum. Where there's a vacancy, let's fill it. Let's know that reality is that the progress of our nation has been about the expansion of our rights, not the restriction of our rights. We're seeing a U-turn right now for those rights to be maintained, which means we have to be vigilant. It's just the nature of it. We have to be clear-eyed, and it doesn't mean we have to see the beauty in everything. These things also coexist, but I believe we fight for something, not against. That's obviously rambling. She appeared to be intoxicated, if you look at the clip. So this isn't surprising. And let's go to the content of what she's saying here and put it in context. The only thing that she says that makes any amount of sense is the expansion of rights, not the restriction of rights. So this is the narrative that the left is going for. Donald Trump is coming to take your rights, and apparently Elon Musk to steal your data. The reality about this is that no one's rights are being taken. Not the gay rights, not LGBTQ rights, not trans rights. Everybody, every individual has individual rights. Those are the rights you have. You don't get group rights. You don't get special carve-outs. That's the thing about dismantling DEI, that the whole purpose of it is because they created cutouts for specific groups, which we don't want. We don't want cutouts for specific groups. You get individual rights. All the rights that are granted to individuals or guaranteed to individuals are guaranteed to everybody, whether you're trans or gay or whatever. So you have to know what those rights are to stick up with for your rights. So people think you have a right to an abortion. Well, you don't have a right, not legally guaranteed right. People think you have the right to food and shelter. Not legally guaranteed right. Now you want to make that a right, or you want to amend the Constitution, I guess you could. I'm not saying you don't deserve those things, but that's my problem. More from One American News. Austria, teen killed, 4 injured in stabbing attack. Syrian national detained. Reuters is reporting Austrian knife attack suspect was radicalized on TikTok. The 23-year-old Syrian refugee believed to have killed a teenager and injured 5 other people in the weekend stabbing rampage in an Austrian town of Villach became radicalized quickly by using TikTok, officials said on Monday. The suspect, identified as Ahmad G, I don't know why they don't put in his full name, had a flag of the Islamic State. So basically radicalized by the CIA on TikTok. More news from Fox News. Trump congratulates U.S. military after airstrike that killed an official of Al-Qaeda affiliate. Dealt justice. The terrorist leader was working with Al-Qaeda across the region. So this airstrike happened in Syria, where we aided Islamic militants to overthrow the government there. And that was under the Biden administration, and now Trump comes in and kills one of them. More news from the New York Post. Stay with me. Brazen Canadian coyotes smuggling migrants across the northern border, even advertising on TikTok. Well, it appears that TikTok is now the new Telegram. So all criminal elements and terrorist elements seem to be communicating on TikTok and getting their message out in 30 seconds. How long is TikTok? A minute, 30 seconds, whatever. Zero Hedge is reporting the Fed has stopped pretending that price inflation is going away. It isn't, at least not now. The reason is, and if you looked at the segment that I showed on my show yesterday, Kevin Hassett, who's the economic advisor for Donald Trump, I put that clip up separately on my YouTube channel. He even said that the last 6 months of Biden during his lame duck, the 2 months, particularly during his lame duck period, he was shoveling money out the door. And as it's been proved out by Lee Zeldin, who found $6 billion stowed away in the, what is he? Is he FDA? No, he's not. Is he FDA? Lee Zeldin is the hell? Was he FDA? In any case, in Lee Zeldin's department post, he found $6 billion. gotta excuse me. I'm a little foggy. My sinus infection. I get them. They keep coming back all winter long and fucks me up. All right, so I gotta go. I'm gonna start at this article here. It's kind of out of order. What the hell is wrong with CBS News? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with CBS News. So everybody, at least on the right, on conservative media, is going after Maggie Brennan, which I go after her every week. I mean, Face the Nation is the best talking head show. Not because it's great, but it's better than most. And Maggie Brennan is a smart anchor, but she's part of the Council on Foreign Relations, and so she's involved in the corporate fascist structure. And she's usually pretty smart, but just recently when she interviewed Marco Rubio and suggested that free speech caused the Holocaust, everybody called her out as being dumb. So maybe she's just tired, but she's been losing in her recent interviews. I think people have figured out how to defeat her. In her recent interviews with conservatives, she's been routed several times by J.D. Vance. I think he set the tone in how to defeat Margaret Brennan. And so Marco Rubio did the same. And so PJ Media is posing the question, what the hell is wrong with CBS News? And the reasoning behind this is, and there hasn't been any apology from CBS suggesting that free speech caused the Holocaust. And the reasoning is they're doubling down on the corporate fascist propaganda, which includes, and this whole thing was about censorship because of J.D. Vance's reporting his speech at the Munich Security Conference and scolding European leaders about censorship, which comes in a variety of forms, but is really bad in Germany and pretty bad in the UK and in France and some of the other major NATO countries. So the article from Fox here says, German prosecutors tell 60 Minutes, which is a CBS news magazine, it's a crime to insult people online as government raids offenders' homes. CBS's Sharon Alfonso touted Germany's efforts as trying to bring some civility to the World Wide Web by policing it. Now, this is out of control, but it's already happened in Britain, where, people making jokes, whatever, their dogs doing Hi Hitler. It was a joke. And a lot of these things are jokes. Maybe they're not jokes, but arresting people is going too far. Certainly, the state policing speech. But this is a concerted effort, which is part of the corporate fascism. It's a concerted effort, no matter how you look at it. So the New World Order agenda includes censoring free speech. And so we're trying to claw it back in any case. So the reality here is that CBS pushing the propaganda narrative of the New World Order is free speech is dangerous, or free speech is, or speech is violence, or whatever, which is kind of this, kind of hooks up with this transgender dysphoric nonsense. And this leads me back to the New York Times article from last week or over the weekend. Trump officials attack on a German consensus on Nazis in speech. Vice President J.D. Vance and Elon Musk have challenged decades-long approaches to political extremism that were designed to prevent another Hitler. And it links into calling everybody Hitler, Nazis, racist, extremist, far right, extreme right. And I outlined this yesterday, is the problem in Europe is immigration. And as we just saw, there's a knife attack in Austria by someone who was radicalized, an extremist Muslim or Islamic extremist. Whether he was radicalized here or over there, it doesn't friggin' matter. More international news. One American news, Zelensky rejects Trump mineral deal, warns of imminent Russia-NATO war. This is more fear-mongering and, again, setting up the false flag. So it looks like NATO and Europe are resigned on a peace deal that they will thwart by putting their own military in Ukraine and then having some of them get killed by a drone or a missile or something. And as I said before, then we're off to the races. All right, let's move on to Doge. From the post-millennial Doge, Senator Mike Lee demand entry into Fort Knox to examine gold reserves. We want to know if it's still there. Yeah, so there's been a rumor floating around for as long as I've been reading the news, so 40, 50 years, that Fort Knox, someone took all the gold out of Fort Knox. And the gold reserves that were supposed to be the American people's were taken by nefarious oligarchs. Also during 9/11, to tie into this, there was a truckload, a tractor trailer truckload of gold bars that weren't stolen, but were driven out from underneath the World Trade Center the day of the attack. When this happened, why it happened, who ordered this evacuation of the gold. But it leads people to believe that someone knew it was going to happen. If you didn't hear, over the weekend, a Delta plane crashed in Toronto. But PJ Media reports that didn't take long. NBC blames Canada plane crash on Trump. And how did they do that? Well, NBC's Tom Costello shamelessly attempted to tie the crash to President Trump, Elon Musk, and their controversial Department of Government Efficiency. Costello said this is going to yet again raise the concern about FAA staffing, air traffic control staffing, suggesting a link between the crash and the staffing issues at the FAA, clearly not having a clue to what he was talking about. He went on to question whether air traffic control staffing in America had any bearing on the incident. But we all know that the FAA has trouble staffing because it's a highly stressful job and it takes a major intellect and multitasker to do it. And the pay isn't that great. So that's why they have trouble staffing the FAA. So any undermining of the FAA, it could affect the safety of air travel. But what we found out recently was they rejected light air traffic controllers because they wanted their staffing makeup to be reflective of their DEI initiative. Which I say continuously, DEI can affect competency and capability. So, not saying that people of color or of different backgrounds or handicapped dwarves or whoever you're trying to staff with, that they're incompetent. But as I illustrated yesterday, the pool that you're drawing from, especially if it's a minority, is smaller. So if you're trying to draw from a pool of competency that is smaller, it's harder to get people at a certain level of competency that you want. Speaking of competency, the post-millennial admits, or it's, excuse me, post-millennial headline, CNN admits Dems are powerless amid GOP takeover of federal government. Senator Cory Booker admitted that the levers of power the Democrats have are limited. Indeed, they lost. They lost big time. So, moving on. Where are we? Just the News is reporting Congress unmasks perils of Beijing Biden era. China expanding mass espionage efforts. Well, before I get into this article, I just want to say I've been touting this for some time. That the extent of the Joe Biden crime family business was not for the simple reason of just enriching the family. It also had a lot to do with espionage. So the reason the tell was really the Chinese spy balloon. But it appears that the deal was that the Biden administration was going to turn their backs on Chinese espionage for whatever the 4 years he was in presidency. This probably occurred during the Obama administration too. While the Chinese or the CCP spies could do whatever they want. And we saw that. Buying of land near military bases, the spy balloon, the biological espionage that was taking place, the CCP police stations who were rounding up dissidents on American soil. Very disturbing. So Just the News reports that revelations made 2 years ago that Joe Biden's family sought to cash in on the communist Chinese with millions in payments immediately raised concerns about what Beijing got in return. Now, new evidence unearthed by the U.S. House suggests that America's main adversary may have succeeded in launching a mass espionage blitz on the last administration's watch, what I just said. The House Homeland Security Committee last week painted the contours of the Chinese surveillance surge, documenting that more than 60 espionage operations in 20 states during the Biden administration that unmasked the breadth of the Beijing's efforts to steal America's intellectual property and the tools of its military might. In addition, lawmakers confirmed the Chinese spy balloon that embarrassed the Biden administration 2 years ago when it traversed the U.S. airspace for days unimpeded likely contained technologies from multiple U.S. companies. Like I said, the New World Order had a plan, and that plan was for Beijing or this Chinese Communist Party to become to gain supremacy. First in the world community and then overall. And then what you would see is the erosion of individual liberties worldwide and replaced with the kowtowing to Chinese style or Chinese communist style, Maoist style authoritarianism, which was indeed occurring. It just, we were the last ones to notice. But if you went around the world, you'd see it. And a lot of it was happening here in the terms of just biting your own tongue and not wanting to offend people culturally, which is your right to do. We're not living in Germany where the police are going to come to your house because you insult somebody. I don't like to insult people personally. But if you disrespect me, all bets are off. Like, I could take some insulting, right? But let me have my retort. But I certainly would never, if you insulted me, I certainly would not ever authorize or condone the FBI coming to your house saying, hey, you're under arrest or you're fined for insulting somebody. Threatening is a different issue. So you might have seen this over the weekend. The National Review is reporting that the necessary act of cross-checking rude Canadians. So if you didn't know what happened here, Canadians booed the U.S. national anthem before the U.S. men's hockey game against the Canadians. The Americans proceeded to beat the ever-loving snot out of the Canucks by both literally and on the scoreboard, with the result after 3 periods reading 3-1. And because USA is the best, we played free bird after every score. So after our earlier 6-1 shellacking of the Finlandiers, Skinner has pounded quasi-socialist eardrums 9 times in 2 games. National Review is a little bit verbose. Just the News is reporting Musk brings the receipts as polling shows Trump and Doge have public backing despite critics. We all agree on that. On American News, Doge prepares to potentially audit Fort Knox and its gold reserves. Rand Paul encourages the efforts. I should have paired this with the Mike Lee. I'm sorry, these are out of order. Rand Paul's father, Ron Paul, has been encouraging, railing, protesting for an audit not only of the Federal Reserve, but also of the United States gold reserves, which were looted some time ago. Americans were looted during World War II by FDR. And then when Nixon took us off the gold standard, took the dollar off the gold standard, that hurt people immensely. And that's what Ron Paul would advocate for, putting us back on the gold standard. Texas law enforcement officers keep getting arrested for crimes near the border. So a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer was arrested in El Paso on criminal charges of allegedly human smuggling and drug trafficking. There are always bad police officers. That's not to say that they should all be characterized as such. Wall Street Journal is sowing fear by saying first cows, now cats. It's bird flu coming for the humans next. With so much H5N1 virus circulating across the U.S., scientists worry that we are a few mutations away from a potential human pandemic. You see how the establishment is fighting back. So they're threatening to release a humanized bird flu. That's coming. I hate to say it. It is. I hope there's some way to undermine this whole thing. Maybe RFK Jr. could get and Doge can get into the Pentagon and figure out, where these samples of virus are and destroy them. But we have that, and we have the global establishment preparing to antagonize the Russians further during the peace process and launch a false flag to continue this war of attrition against Russia. Might have seen this on Saturday. New York Post is reporting Tom Hanks roasted over disgusting portrayal of Trump supporter at SNL 50th anniversary special. If you didn't see it, it was the Black Jeopardy skit. A two-time Academy Award winner returned to the stage Sunday night as Doug, a dumb MAGA hat-wearing contestant on the recurring bit Black Jeopardy, where the butt of the joke is Hank's character and the black contestants discovering their similarities. So apparently his character said he didn't like shaking hands with black people. Quite ridiculous. When are they going to stop? When are they going to stop? You lost. And the more you revert to the shaming of people that support a political movement, when is it going to be over? When are you going to eat crow? Is it going to be when we discover that millions or billions of dollars went to child sex trafficking from the taxpayer kitty? Is it going to take something like that? Or people just won't believe it? Are they going to find out that the CIA was secretly funding Islamic radicals and their terrorist attacks? The Guardian reports revealed Google facilitated Russia and China's censorship request. Of course they did. An investigation has exposed tech firms' cooperation with autocratic regimes to remove unfavorable content. They built the authoritarian regimes or autocratic regimes. They built them. Not so much Russia per se, definitely China. That's the model. China is the model for the New World Order. I think we're going to end it at 50 minutes. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 5 at 10 a.m. on Rumble. Every Tuesday night, almost every Tuesday night, we have a episode of Tuesdays with Perry where me and my friend from Florida, Perry, get together and discuss the latest headlines and topics in the news. So join it. I don't know if we're going to have one tonight. I was on the mend yesterday, and now I'm feeling kind of shitty today. You know, when you start feeling better, you're like, hey, I feel better now. Let's go do whatever. And then the next day you feel like shit again. Don't forget you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to the trick. Don't fall for it. Especially when it comes to the war in Russia, Russia's aggression, and censorship is for your own good and all this other crap. And small minority carve-outs, we need to overrepresent minorities in everything to the detriment of competency. And like I said before, I don't believe that people part of minority groups aren't competent, but the pool is smaller. So if you have to shoe in people from minorities, you might, for the reason of getting a brown person in there, you could sacrifice competency. So anyway, thanks for joining me today. I doubt we'll have an episode Tuesdays with Perry. I have to talk to him, and we'll see. We usually go live about 9:15 on Tuesdays. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
This is all a conspiracy. No, you know that it's a conspiracy there.